well, I don't know if they produce babies during fall. Basically, my sheep are now pregnant, or at least some of them are. So that means that come winter, they'll start adding to the number of sheep I have in the fields. But they're pregnant for a few days, and you have to keep them healthy when they're pregnant. It's probably a good idea to keep them healthy when they're producing wool to maximise wool production. And then if you play on this version of the map, you need all the stuff to keep them happy. So they eat grass or clover, and we've already proven clover doesn't decay under any circumstances. Whether you leave it outside, inside, loose or baled, it's untouchable by the environment. So for the most part, I'm going to be producing clover to feed my sheep, and I'm not even going to bother with grass, except hopefully as a food source during the late spring, summer and fall, because the grass is just happens to be in the field they're standing in, and automatically they'll eat that. They're assumed to eat that, so I don't have to provide it to. So I will need clover in the barn for when winter comes, because there won't be any grass for a while, and we just throw clover at the sheep until the grass starts growing again. At least that's the theory. There may be a problem getting clover into the sheep trough, which I haven't figured out yet. And that may be me, it may be something else, or it might be a bug on the map. But if that doesn't work, then we're going to be short. Let's put the brake on. Where is it? It's this one. It's fresh grass, clover, fresh maize, and hay pellets. See, I could produce hay pellets. The problem is that's expensive. That's $500,000 or £500,000 of equipment to buy the pelletizer. And equipment purchases are not something I'm really looking to this year. However, it'll be too late by the time we find out we can't use our clover. We absolutely can't use our clover to actually purchase anything this year and make use of it. And we're not growing maize, we're not growing we're not growing a lot of stuff. But if we get into the middle of winter and they're not accepting our clover, well, we can sell that because it's all baled up. But I've got no other food source for the cow or for the sheep at that point to fulfill that food requirement. Missed a few bits, but that's all fine. We're not going to make it back to the top, which is why I decided to go around this side. Doing a cut through would have been a disaster. There's my truck, there's my truck. This is actually the long way round, so Oh, actually, not so long round. And this is one of our bigger fields. 7.7 hectares. This is, I think, is our biggest. That's 9. That's 4.75. So yeah, that's our biggest field. This is our second biggest field. How big's that one? Yeah, 5 more. So we've got 12 hectares of sunflowers to harvest. That's done. I've only done one unload so far, so I'm not sure how yielding this field is going to be at the end of the day. Stopped. You're good. You're on and in and go. Yeah, as I said, I think my plans, because we've harvested our triticale fields and we're going to put an oil seed on both of those fields. The field I put digestate on, we're going to plant with canola, because we can plant that anytime now. And then the other field I put oilseed radish on, so that we can see what nitrogen adder the oilseed radish effect is. And we'll put sunflowers in that field. These two fields we'll put a grain in. I've got some spare spelt seed, so I might do that. The other option would be rye. And yeah, I'm really not worried either way. They're both, I think they're all pretty much similar prices when it boils down to it. Wheat, barley, yeah, all of them. Okay. We have enough for a cut through now. Let's run over here. So this is where having GPS would be handy. But because then you can make the cut through at a precise number of header widths from the edge. But it made the harvester cheaper, so not, and you know, you can do harvesting by eye quite effectively using GPS. Makes it a little bit more precise, but I'm not too bothered about how precise it is, to be honest. Probably cut through a little bit too far over here. Good there. It's not exactly straight, and I'm not exactly cutting precisely to the width of the header, but it's acceptable. When playing without precision farming, obviously, the fertilizing. You know, if I buy a fertilizer tractor, I'm going to add GPS to it, because kind of need that to do the last stage of fertilizer because I can't see the ground and the change in the ground texture as I drive over it. Now with precision farming running and the mini-map down in the corner up, you can see where you've been because it shows you the nitrogen content map as you're spreading the fertilizer. So again, it's something that I don't need the GPS on because I have a visual representation of where I've been. Now that was the other thing we did get confirmed that there is no native GPS in FarmSim 22. So we're going to have to go back to eyeballing everything. And for the first few months we're not going to have precision farming, so the whole change in ground texture is going to be our visual cue as to where we've done things and where we haven't. Correct, yes. You've got the air temperature, you've got the soil temperature. So at the moment our soil temperature is 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Playing in the UK I should be using Celsius. But yes, it's... But, you know, and remember, that's the temperature needed for the seeds to germinate. So you can plant when the ground's too cold, and my tests have been you won't have a problem so long as the temperatures are going up. And so, you know, again, if we go here, if we look at sunflowers, 45 degrees, and I can plant them anytime from mid-spring to late spring. The problem with mid-spring is we might be very close to 45 degrees and it goes up to 48 degrees during the daytime and it drops to 36 at night time. That's a problem because it may be warm enough for me to plant the seeds during this period, but if at night time it drops below that, the seeds are going to fail to germinate and you will have patches of fields that don't grow. If I wait till here, however, we're now on a temperature scale which is going upwards, and it goes up and it comes down a little bit at night time, and then it goes up and it comes down a little bit at night time, and it goes up. So if the temperature is 48 degrees during the day, it may drop to 45 at night, but that's still warm enough for the seed to germinate. And then tomorrow it's going to be going up to 55 and then 65. So the risk of failure to germinate is effectively eliminated. So even if it's 43 degrees today, if it becomes 45 degrees during the day tomorrow and then overnight it doesn't drop below 45 degrees, I don't lose anything. The seeds germinate, the crop grows. So that's what you've got to watch. It's not so much we're at the temperature, it's good to go. It's worrying about what it's going to do overnight tonight when it cools down, and is that going to be low enough that it's going to kill the seed, and you're going to get a patch of failure to germinate. But you could plant the seed, and I have done accidentally at times. I've planted seed when it's not warm enough for the seed to germinate, and I haven't lost anything because 3 days later when it gets warm enough for the seed to germinate, it never then drops below that temperature again, and so once the seed has germinated it starts growing. I think the temperature thing is once if it germinates and then the temperature drops before it starts being in the growth stage, then you get a failure to germinate. So I can go back to here. So you get cultivated growing. You've got planted, which I don't have a planted field. This used to be a planted field, but how about my grasses? Or are my grasses growing? No, my grasses are now growing. You get the very deep, this yellow. You've planted it, and that's the first step after planting. That night, it will then test the temperatures. And if the temperature got warm enough during the day for it to germinate, it will turn to the very light green growing state. If the temperatures dropped below, were above but then dropped below, then you will get patches of fail to germinate. But it's a small patch. It's like the weeds. A small patch here, a small patch there, a small patch there of failure to germinate. So you lose 100% of the crop yield in that little patch, but no more. Then once it starts growing, it'll go through the growth stages, and then it goes through the harvest stages. And if the crop gets too dry, you'll get a withered crop. It died due to lack of moisture. And obviously that's where this information panel, that information panel comes in, where it says the frost resistance, once it's as seed, it's resistant to frost. If it's not resistant to frost, your seed will just completely fail. So if it's below, obviously US I'm using, so if it's below 32 degrees, I could lose sunflower, soybeans, corns, all of this stuff, but they're late spring plants. These crops you can plant during the fall months, and so they might break the surface, but they're going to survive the frost. You might get a little bit of failure, but most of the time they're not. These aren't. You don't plant them when it's going to be cold. Once they're mature, you need to harvest them before it snows. Corn, not so much. Corn will survive a little bit of snow. Oilseed radish just survives everything because it's oilseed radish and it's heroic crop. Okay, turn that on, turn that off. So, yeah, it's... I need to get my camera back to where I like it. There we go. So yeah, those are the sorts of things you're struggling, you're juggling with. But yes, I have completely accidentally planted crop when it wasn't warm enough and I wasn't paying attention. I planted 10 fields of crop when it was 4 degrees Celsius, and it was sort of, well, I'm allowed to plant the crop at this moment. It's sort of, it's not growing. What's going on? And then I looked at the temperature, so I planted it when it was too cold. And well, that was dumb, I'm going to lose this crop. And it turned out, because the temperatures just never went over, I think sunflowers is about 9-10 degrees Celsius, it didn't start growing. So it's sort of, okay. And then all of a sudden, I think it was the last day of spring, it got warm enough. It went over 10 degrees, and that night the crops all germinated and started growing the next day. And it's sort of, and I had no germination failure at all. So it's sort of, okay, so that's actually a thing. So yeah, I've made the mistake of looking at the air temperature, but I have made the mistake of just not looking at the temperature at all and just putting seeds in the ground because I put all the other seeds in the ground. And you go in and you say, What's the temperature I'm supposed to plant these at? And you're looking at this and saying, yep, it's 41 degrees, I can go out and plant everything. And then you plant a field of oats and a field of sunflowers and a field of soybeans, and you're just not paying attention. And then the next thing you know is, oh no, I planted the wheat at the right time, but those oats, it's not warm enough for them. Yeah. You're risking germination failure, but it's not a guarantee, and it's not 100% of the field. Now, I'm kind of wondering, since Giants are incorporating seasons, well, a form of seasons into Farm Sim 22, and not the seasons that game of play that we're used to with Realismus's seasons mod. Is Realismus going to do another seasons style mod that sort of enhanced seasons that piggybacks onto what Giants have done for 22, or are they just going to do other things instead? And we're just going to have to live with what Giants gives us, and how comprehensive or not that might be. Be interesting to see. Obviously, if Giants have taken care of things like foliage for the seasons and what have you, they may be able to produce an enhanced season style mod that gives us the gameplay that we're currently used to in a much shorter length of time, much less than a year, that we usually have to wait for Realismus to give us a seasons mod in the game. And it may be that Giants seasons are okay, and it's not the seasons we're used to, but it's there's enough functionality there that we look at it and say, yeah, that's okay. But all something we're going to have to wait and see how it happens when it happens. So while this wasn't entirely precise, and you can see this bit's a little bit narrower than the header, when we started it was about the same width. My cut-through guess is not poor for this pass, but there's times I'm running up and doing 1 or 2 rows because I completely guessed wrong, and it's a guess. When I perform the cut through, I have no method of determining precise. Again, at this end, we are running on the full width of the header. Yeah. I think we'll be able to cut through because we're slowly getting a shorter and shorter triangle. But yeah, regardless of what happens, this play through the Saturday stream will continue as Oakfield Farm, probably into the first couple of months of 2022. Just so I have time to investigate how Seasons works without completely embarrassing myself on camera, and also to wait for some mod maps to get released. A little bit there. I'm probably less inclined to do a wholesale transfer of monetary value across from this farm to the next one again. We might cheat in a little extra money in order to give ourselves some reasonable equipment and a lot of land. That's the thing with for something like the Saturday morning stream, I don't want to be starting with 2 small fields, 3 small tractors and a small harvester. Especially doing play with seasons, it takes a long time to get established, and I've done that. I've done the hey, let's play a start from scratch where we've got 500,000 in all and buy limited amount of equipment and fields, but it does take a long time to get started. And I kind of like to vary things a bit. So, regardless of that, we might need a money cheat mod available in order to get a farm set up to be at least interesting. And I think, it kind of to do with the gameplay that you're trying to produce. This, we want it to be interesting. It's not a challenge. It's not a role play. It's engine turned off. Engine on. Oh, don't do that. Do that. No, don't do that. But yeah, and I've done challenge series, I've done start from scratch, I've done the small farm thing. Most of the time I've done the small farm thing on something like the Old Stream Farm, which is coming out for 22. And I like that map. But it's not something that really keeps the gameplay alive. From my viewpoint, it's very easy to expand the Old Stream Farm because the fields are small, therefore they're cheap, but you're not making much money on a harvest because the harvest is done in 5 minutes, and that's in part some of the problem. Is if we've taken all of today to harvest this field so far.